Evening and welcome to the Cuyahoga County Progressive Caucus March membership meeting. Our topic for March is issues at the Ohio Statehouse, and our main speaker, Rachel Coyle, is an expert at that. I'm Steve Aleko. I am the political director of the organization, and I want to give you an update, a format, how we do Zoom meetings here at the start. We do not put a lot of links in the chat, and we've got a lot of links tonight. And the reason we don't put them in the chat is because people are looking back and forth and so forth. And so what we'll do is we'll send you an email tomorrow with all of the links that we're going to talk about. Included in these links will be a link to join the Progressive Caucus. We sometimes have people at our meetings who aren't members. They like what they see and they want to become members. A link to donate to the Progressive Caucus. We are all volunteer funded, all volunteer staffed, and we depend on people like you to keep us in business with small contributions. There will be a link to the video of this event. The email is going to go out to people who were either here or registered. Sometimes folks register and they can't make it for some reason. And then a bunch of links from Rachel Coyle about all the stuff that she's going to talk about, including she has an excellent slide presentation. There'll be a link to that as well. Then we're going to have a link to, just in case you get really angry at the things Rachel's going to talk about, and believe it or not, things in Columbus are almost as bad as they are in Washington, and you're so angry you want to do something about it. Join Larry Bressler and Noble for a lobby day coming up next Tuesday, March 25th. Speaking of what's going on in Washington, we have an ever expanding list of Trump resistance events in the area. That list gets updated daily, sometimes hourly. And so if you haven't been to a protest yet and you want to do something, please take a look at those links. And finally, we'll have a link to our April meeting, which is going to be the state of labor in Northeast Ohio. And our guest speaker at that meeting is going to be Brian Pearson, who is the executive secretary of the North Shore AFL-CIO Federation of Labor. So, Larry, would you like to take the helm and talk about Lobby Day?
Larry, you have to unmute.
Thank you. Sorry. Right now, every odd year, the state of Ohio passes has to pass their annual budget. So it's multi-billion-dollar budget, and so notwithstanding that there's all these things that Rachel are going to talk about right now, this is the biggest focus within the General Assembly in terms of how it's going to be passed, and just to in terms of what's going to be passed. And by and large, over recent years, there's been a few good things, but we're more than anything, we're trying to fight the bad things that can come out of it. And so just a few. So we're having a lobby day next Tuesday. And you're going to be sent the flyer along with the links to be able to join if you're interested. We'll be having transportation from Cleveland going down to Columbus, and it's and basically there's a host of different kind of things we're going to be dealing with, and a few highlights in terms of things that we're very concerned about that I think are important for us to be talking to the legislation. We'll be talking about the House and the Senate, with probably a focus on the Senate at this point a little more because they haven't quite started yet and they're about to. But a few things that, by the way, one of the people that's also on here is Lauren Schenk, who's one of our organizers. We've been really kind of coordinating in terms of getting this together. But a few things I think that are really important that I think it needs to be that we're particularly concentrating on, although there'll be others, is one is in terms of Medicaid. To me, that's the most serious concern. We have currently for Medicaid expansion, which provides Medicaid services to adults with non-dependent children. That right now we have 771,000 people that are on it in Ohio, and in the governor's budget, he's put a trigger in that basically says that if the federal match goes any lower than it is right now, that they're going to eliminate it. That would be horrible to happen. We don't want to see that happen. Second thing is in terms of tax, and just in terms of tax, there's a danger, although we don't, that there could be a flat tax. You know, we've had nothing but tax cuts over recent years that have benefited the wealthy and hurt the poor, and a flat tax would move heavily in that direction. We also want to see a refundable option, state income tax credit. Not impossible, we can get that. And that would, and again, that would really benefit low and moderate income people. I think that one of the things that scares all of us, is what's been happening with public education. Already, in terms of what the governor's put forward, for all practical purposes, can be a decrease, particularly for lower income schools in the state of Ohio. At the same time, they're increasing vouchers, which the people who've been using them are wealthy people from Ohio, even though in most cases, maybe even, the people who are going have already been in private school and now they're getting paid for them. And then the other thing that I think we have there's a chance to win the question in terms of how much is around childcare. You know, Ohio's subsidies and support for childcare is one of and maybe the worst in the entire country. But this is an area even Republicans are upset about. The problem is in terms of how much support they're going to do. Lauren did a terrific testimony showing what in terms of just what the governor asked for, which was an increase, but not good enough. The people still in moderate incomes could not afford to get childcare. So those are a few things that we're doing. So we're going down to Columbus next Tuesday. We need people to register. We're going to be meeting, at 9 a.m. at the Trinity Episcopal Church, which is on the corner of 3rd and Broad, and that's what we'll be using as our base. We'll be providing lunch there. People who go down will get continental breakfast as well. Lauren has been actively working to set up appointments with all kinds of legislators, and so we will, so we'll be breaking people into small groups and meeting where people can talk about some of the issues that are. We'll be talking about some big issues, but also people can talk about issues that are particularly priorities to them in this regards. And so we're anxious to get as many people as we can. In the past, the Progressive Caucus has members of the Progressive Caucus have come down and actively participated, and we really hope that can happen again.
Larry, I noticed on the flyer, free breakfast and lunch.
That's correct.
Okay, I think you forgot to mention that. So,
okay, so. And people that come from Cleveland will provide transportation for anybody that wants to come down. Again, no cost for anything.
All right, thank you, Larry. Brian Hambly, Democratic candidate for Secretary of State next year, is in the House. Welcome, Brian. Would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, you're good.
That's great. I would just take 1 or 2 minutes to introduce myself. I actually met Larry during a anti-poverty march in 2016 when Trump was doing the RNC. So it's good to see several people, Deb as well, that I've met before. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Brian Hambly. I'm a leukemia physician at the University of Cincinnati, the Safety Net Hospital in Cincinnati, and I'm running for Secretary of State. My goal is to be part of a coalition that finally gets rid of gerrymandering and moves us towards an independent redistricting commission in the state of Ohio. I know that undermines progressive power in our state, and so that's what's caused me to run. I'll just say one other thing that I don't think it's a minority opinion that districts should be drawn by an independent redistricting commission. I know many of you were active with the anti-gerrymandering issue one last year. And, you may know that in July, there was a poll where 55% of Ohioans plan to support an independent redistricting commission. But the ballot language written by our Secretary of State undermined that work and led to a 10-point loss or 7-point loss rather than a 10-point victory. I think that coalition of people who believe in an independent redistricting commission still exists, and we need to strip away the underhanded ballot language that the Republican Party has used to try to attack this effort. And so my hope is to gather together a team of people that are interested in taking back the Secretary of State's office from the Republican Party in 26, and then to put a independent redistricting commission back on the state ballot in 27 or 28. And I think that's the best way to do it. So I'll pause there. That's just a little about me. I know you have a packed meeting agenda, but happy to take any advice or questions, and I'll drop our website in the chat for anyone who's interested. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Brian. Quick question.
Of course.
Would you be willing to come back to one of our meetings at some point and take the whole time?
I would love it and would be happy to. I've got a 7-minute spiel and then a question and answers sessions that would love to do it. And you and I could email about when's a good time, but I'll be in Cleveland frequently. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Brian. All right, without further ado, our main attraction tonight is Rachel Coyle. She is the Communications Director at Innovation Ohio, and she also runs a popular advocacy program, How Things Work at the Ohio Statehouse. Rachel.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. I've actually moved on from Innovation Ohio now, but I'll let you know about the new role as we're talking.
I'm so sorry. I Googled it in and I thought that was it. So
oh, no.
I apologize.
Spent several wonderful years with them. Let's see. So I'm going to switch over here and share my screen, and we're going to talk through some madness happening at the Statehouse, but first going to talk through how the Statehouse operates so that you can feel confident being part of the process once we learn about all these bills. So I'm going to share my screen here. All right. Perfect. And you should all see my screen at this point.
Yep, we got it.
Great. So this is a slightly shortened version of this presentation so that we can focus more time on Q&A and also talking through some of the big bills that are happening at the state level right now. So basic introduction. Steve mentioned that everything I talk about, every link, every website will be sent to you. So don't worry about memorizing it all or writing it all down. It will all come to you afterwards. And also don't worry if you've mostly focused your attention on the federal level. That's very, very common, especially because that's where the news mostly focuses as well. So I try to make these presentations focused on anyone, no matter what your skill level is. If you've never focused on the Statehouse before, or if you've done Statehouse advocacy, but you want to pick up some more tips and tricks. So the first thing, this is the most important slide. I want you to remember how much power you have at the state level. If you remember nothing else after tonight, this is the slide that you need to take away, because there are so few people who actually pay attention at this level. It does not take very many of us to make a ton of noise at the Statehouse level. It really, when I worked there, we used to go hours in between a single constituent call. So if everyone on this call got together on the same day and called the Statehouse, you could shut down their phone lines. You really, really could. But that also means that it only takes a few people who really disagree with you, who want to pass something harmful, to also make a lot of noise. So if you don't use your power, if you don't use your voice, it's only going to take a couple people on the other side using their voices to get very dangerous things across the finish line. So as an example of how powerful you are, one of the groups that I work with now, Ohioans Against Extremism, we actually decided to start tracking some of our work that we were doing last year to see how much power we have, to show people how much they can accomplish at this level. So this was a website that we operated in the last couple of months of last year during the lame duck session. And it's one of my favorite websites ever, lameduck.wtf. But basically, our goal was to help people take action throughout the whole process. So we would update it regularly with calls to action, with phone numbers to call, with emails to send, when testimony was needed. And then after the lame duck session was over, we tracked how everything turned out. And this actually is just the part of the tracker where we were focusing on bills we wanted to pass, good things that we were trying to get done. And you can see everything marked in red is a good bill that we were fighting for, that we successfully passed into law. And, you know, you don't hear about it in the news because a lot of the news focuses on federal stuff, but this matters. This is bills that are improving tens of thousands of lives, which is the goal. So I'll tell you about a couple of them. One bill that I'm really proud of that we passed is going to provide state ID cards for inmates and other documentation for inmates to help them find work and housing and help them vote and basically re-enter society when they get out of jail or prison, so that they don't end up back in the system because they couldn't get a job, because they couldn't find housing, that kind of thing. That is going to improve thousands of lives of inmates, but it's also going to improve the lives of everyone who loves them, their kids, their spouses, and it's going to save taxpayers money because we won't have to be paying for people to go in and out of the system as often. I'm really excited about that bill. Another bill that we passed that I'm really excited about is going to require all insurance to cover hearing aids for children. Right now in Ohio, before this law goes into effect, hearing aids are considered a cosmetic fix, which is disgusting. But after this law goes into effect here soon, every young person 21 and under will have access to the technology you need to hear. And that is going to change just countless lives and the lives of everyone who then interacts with them. So it really is just, the goal is to make the world better. And we have been able to see us doing that at the state level, even if it's not stuff that gets a lot of public attention. So what we're going to talk about today is I'll do some Statehouse basics, some like terms you need to know. I'll talk about how a bill becomes a law in Ohio and where you can actually be part of that process, and then give you some resources, which I will email to you, and then also talk through several bills that are moving right now that need your action, your activism, and then we'll do some Q&A. So some very basic terms. The first one is General Assembly, or GA. So that refers to the Statehouse, but it also refers to the 2-year period that they operated. That is very important. That means that any bill that's introduced only has those 2 years to go through the whole process, House, Senate, governor's desk, everything, and be signed into law. Even if it gets most of the way there, but is not signed by the end of its 2 years, the bill will die and it has to start completely over again next time around. So that actually leads us to our second term, which is lame duck. So at the end of every 2-year period, you end up with legislators who are they're running around the state house trying to pass every bill they've introduced for 2 years into law because they know they're all about to die. And it creates just chaos. But it also means that so much is happening that they can slip some things through the cracks. They actually tend to hold their most controversial bills for lame duck. And lame duck happens at very inopportune times in Ohio. It happens every 2 years in November and December, right after major federal elections. So our last lame duck session was this past November and December, right after the presidential election, when everyone was just exhausted and they wanted to turn off their brains and turn off their TVs and spend the holidays with their families. And I had to beg everyone to pay attention to the Statehouse, and it was not very effective. So that is just something to mark in your calendar, that the next big lame duck session is November, December of 2026. The next term to note is session. So it has two meanings. One is the time of year when the legislators are working. Technically, in Ohio, it's a part-time job. And it also refers to the times when they're physically in the State House voting on bills. Another term to note in Ohio is supermajority. So I give this presentation in a lot of rooms. I always tell people, I don't care which party it is. Supermajorities of any party are bad for America. They're bad for democracy. It basically means that one party can control the government of your state or of your country without any of the other branches of government. So it gets rid of all of the checks and balances that we learned about in junior high. So in Ohio, we have a Republican supermajority, and it means that if Governor DeWine, who's also Republican, decides to veto something because he thinks it's too extreme or he doesn't think it's a good idea, whatever reason, there are enough Republicans in the House and Senate in Ohio to override that veto and force something into law all by themselves. And that really just gives them just way more power than the other branches of government, which is not how anything is supposed to operate. So this is a quick breakdown of everything you can do with a supermajority. We talked about that veto override. They can also place amendments on the ballot by themselves. The two at the bottom, though, are crossed out because the Democrats in Ohio actually picked up 2 seats in the House and 2 seats in the Senate to this past November, which is nothing else. Like, that did not get covered because everything else was bad and we were all focusing on that. But that was actually a big deal because it broke through the first layer of the supermajority at the State House. So the Republicans can no longer put bills or pass bills with emergency clauses. That means they can't pass something and force it into law the next day. It has to go through the normal 90-day process. And that's huge for elections, for example. They can't pass changes to the voting law right before an election. And so things like that matter. The little increases, the little improvements that the state Democrats have made are important. But obviously that big supermajority, the veto override one, is still in effect. So these are the current leaders of the State House. They will be in charge until the end of 2026. The two gentlemen at the top are the majority party, the Republican Party. The person I want you to focus on is the gentleman at the top right there. So that is Matt Huffman. He is the Speaker of the Ohio House. He is also the most powerful man in Ohio. This man right here is the Donald Trump of Ohio. He is in control of everything. He's very good at wielding power. He is incredibly smart, and he knows how to hold power in a way that scares his colleagues into voting with him. So, for example, the House Republican Caucus normally raises money into the House Republican Caucus Fund, and then everybody gets little bits of it. But this year, they're raising money into the Matt Huffman Fund, and then he doles out the money. Little things like that. He also had, this is a lot of text, so I'll explain it to you. But basically, he had the House pass new rules that give him a lot more power than the previous speaker had. He gave himself the power to fire other people's staff, for example. So just another little thing he could hold over you if you don't do what he wants. He gave himself the power to decide which Democrats, which minority members are on committees. So theoretically, if a Democrat is too effective, asking too good of questions in committee, he could remove them, or he could refuse to replace them if they ever leave with someone the Democrats want. So just little ways that he has given himself this extra bit of power to make sure that everyone does as he wants. So just keep in mind that every single thing that passes in Ohio over the next 2 years will be his doing. Everything that doesn't pass in Ohio will be his fault. And I think it's very important to point out who that is so that people can get to know who to get mad at when things go wrong, essentially, in our state, when bills don't pass that they want, or when programs are removed that they liked. So one thing that he did do, though, that is not actually an official rule, he kind of is hoping that you don't notice it's not an official rule. Matt Huffman went to the press and he told them that he is implementing a new rule that is going to ban people from standing outside the House chambers while they're voting. That is not official. They did not vote that in anywhere. It's not written down anywhere. Basically, what he does is he has just increased the police presence outside the House chamber while they're voting, which does not mean we can't show up to the State House. It actually means that we might just need to be one more room away. So we're going to have to be louder. So truly the answer to him, as is true of all bullies, is to show up more often and in larger numbers and be louder. We have to do exactly the opposite of what they're hoping. He is hoping that we will be scared away from showing up to the State House when the exact opposite is what needs to be done. The great thing is, though, that it is amazing what you can accomplish by being loud at the state level. And truly, you do not need very many people to make a huge impact at this level. So these are articles from just a few weeks ago. There is a bill that we will talk about, Senate Bill 1, that is very unpopular. And they were announcing this bill. And about 25 students showed up to the State House to protest the announcement of the bill. Literally 25 kids. And they didn't go inside the press conference room. They stood outside in the public hallway and they chanted with their signs. But the politicians didn't like that because you could hear the chants on the TV cameras. So they sent out a large police presence to try and physically intimidate the students into leaving. And they did not leave. So what ended up happening was the press heard the ruckus. The press loves a ruckus. They came running. We ended up with all these articles that don't just discuss the bill, they discuss the bill and the students that don't like it. They interview the students. So the student perspective was in the articles. A lot of the article photos are not of the politicians, they're photos of the kids. So it changed the entire narrative of this bill, literally from the start, because 25 students showed up at the State House. It is that easy. Takes that few people to make a loud noise at this level. So this is actually a big part of our entire strategy at the state level. I call it losing loudly. And it's not only our strategy for right now, it's our strategy for if we ever want to win ever again. Basically, people remember the first two parts of what you want to do in politics. Your goal is to make good stuff happen, to make good things happen. Your second goal is to stop bad things from happening. But people forget the third part, which is if you can't make the good thing happen, you can't stop the bad thing from happening, you have to make sure people know who is doing the bad thing. You have to make sure people know who is harming them, who is making things more expensive, who is taking away programs that they like or that they used with their family. We call this losing loudly, and it is so important because we want to, over time, build up a public memory of the harm and who is doing it. So when people go to the ballot someday, they will see Frank LaRose's name and they will think, I'm not sure I like that guy. And they might not know why, but they will have heard his name in a negative context. So it takes constant repetition, it takes constant pressure and effort so that over time you are building up that memory. That's why it's so important to me to make sure everybody knows Matt Huffman's name. So this is a very quick, basic graphic showing you how a bill becomes a law in Ohio. It's very similar to federal government. There is a House, there is a Senate, and the bills go through both of them, not necessarily in an order. They can start in the House or the Senate, and then they go to the governor for his signature. So the first step, obviously, a bill is introduced. It can come from the House or the Senate, usually, and the bills are numbered in a special way that's very important. This actually confuses a lot of people. So the first bill introduced, this 2-year term in the House, is going to be House Bill 1. And it's going to stay House Bill 1 for the whole 2-year period. Even if it passes through the House and goes over to the Senate, it stays House Bill 1. It just tells us where it started and how far along in the process it is. So Senate Bill 1, which again we will talk about, has passed the Senate and is in the House, but it's still Senate Bill 1. That confuses a lot of folks. Another thing that's important to know is this step in the process, the committee process. This is actually where most of the bill changes happen. So if you want to make a bill better or kill a bill or add amendments to it, this is the place where we as activists need to be paying attention. So once a bill is introduced, it gets assigned to a committee. That's just a small group of legislators who get together to talk about bills in a certain topic area. So we've got an education committee, we've got a healthcare committee, agriculture, anything you could care about. The absolute best thing that you could do as an activist is actually be signed up for the email list that goes out when these committees are meeting. So it's called a committee notice list. It's so important that I'm going to send you a document on how to do it, but I'm also going to walk you through it right now because it helps to have seen what the committee websites look like. But so this is the website. I will send this to you as well. It's legislature.ohio.gov. All the committees are listed there. I'm going to click on the Senate committees first. And this again, so this is where most of the magic happens. This is where most of the bill changes happen. So you should really just scroll through these committees and pick the ones that interest you. If you're into energy and environment, sign up for those committees. Just pick the ones that interest you. Click on them. I'm going to click on this finance committee here. And then you see a page like this with all the members' faces who are on that committee. The chair is always listed first. The chair is the most powerful person in the committee. They decide all the rules of the committee. They decide which bills move and which ones don't. They're the ones that basically they decide everything. They're also on the Senate side, the person that you're going to contact if you want to be on that committee notice list. So I'm going to click on Jerry Serino's face because he is the chair. Takes you to his page and you can see his contact information there. You just contact his office, phone or email, and you say, put me on the Senate Finance notice list. And then you'll start getting emails anytime they're meeting. You will know which bills they're hearing, what type of testimony they're accepting, when and where to be if you're going to testify, that kind of thing. So very, very important to get on those notice lists. And then sorry, I do see a hand. So if you want to put your questions in the chat, because I cannot see folks, I will gladly answer those here at the end. All right, so the House made it a little bit easier for us for some reason. Senate has not figured this out. So it's that same website, legislature.ohio.gov. I'm going to click on House committees. And then click on finance. I again recommend going through, picking the committees that interest you and signing up for them. But the House made it so much easier. They have a button, just a nice little button that you can click in the committee page and sign yourself up for the mailing list. You don't have to contact the chair on the House side. So the next step is very important as well. It's once a bill gets assigned to a committee, it's supposed to start having hearings. But a lot of times, especially for the Democrats, but it happens to everyone, this is where a bill just goes and they'll sit for 2 years and it'll die at the end of the 2-year term. So one of the best things we can do as activists is call and demand hearings for good bills, for bills we like. It is amazing how often they will give you a bill hearing to shut you up, which sounds like they're dismissing you, but it actually is a huge step in the process. Because even if you don't get all the way through, even if you get just one more hearing, that matters. So if, for example, you get that second hearing, that supporter testimony hearing, that means that you get to bring in experts and professionals and people who work in that field to talk about why the bill would benefit the state. You get to bring in parents and kids with emotional stories to tell, to talk about the bill and what it would do to their lives. You get to bring the press in. It's recorded on TV, on the Ohio channel. This is how you get the word out about your bill. This is how you make sure that more and more Ohioans are aware of your issue so that eventually over time you build up enough public pressure to pass the bill. So even just getting that one more hearing, getting them to give you one to make you stop calling, that matters. That's a big victory. The other thing we can do is call and demand that they stop hearing bills that we don't like. And again, it is remarkable how often they will cancel a bill hearing because they don't want to deal with protesters. They don't want to deal with pushback. They are hoping to wait you out. They're hoping that you will just move on, you'll forget about the issue, or something else will catch your attention so they can have the bill hearing in a couple weeks and there won't be as much pushback. So a lot of times our strategy is to kill a bill hearing once a week for 2 years until the bill dies. And it works more than it should, which is very entertaining. It works more than it should. And so calling and really just making, like, shutting down the phone lines to let them know that you dislike a bill that strongly is a very good action for state level activism. So yes, I'm saying call a lot. Calling is absolutely the best way to contact the State House. There's lots of other ways. You can email them, you can tweet at them. Unfortunately, all the legislators and the reporters are all still on Twitter. It's by far still the place to get the most responses from them. You can send them letters, but calling matters because it's not like calling Congress. There's not a computer system. They're not going to put your zip code in and then you get kicked out if you're the wrong district. It is literally, there's very few staffers, and your goal is to take up that staffer's time. You want, at the end of the day, you want that staffer to go to their boss and say, oh my God, I got nothing done today because everyone hates that abortion bill. That is a victory. And so again, it matters to take up their time. It matters to call. And there are also very few staffers at the State House. So if you call a lot, you will, and you're nice to them, be nice to them, you will build a relationship with the staffer. And they can actually give us a lot of inside information. The staffers will sometimes call and they'll say, hey, I know you care about this bill. I was just in the hall of the State House and I heard that your bill's going to move next week. You might want to get your people together. That is how few people call the State House. The staffers literally remember you. They remember your bill. And sometimes if they like you, if you're nice to them, they will call and give you inside information. So calling is important. It also matters because they will absolutely get your voicemails at the State House. There's only one phone line per office. So the senators and you are calling the same phone number if they're calling the office. They have to listen to their voicemails. They cannot just like delete them all and start over. But what you should do is you should leave your contact information, leave a phone number, ask for a call back. And it is shocking how often you will get a call back because maybe they only got 5 phone numbers that day. And so they can just call you on their drive home. It is a great test of which legislators are responsive to the public to ask for that call back and see if they respond. And again, it is because so few people contact the State House, it is absolutely appropriate and acceptable to call people who don't represent you. You can call committee chairs if there's a bill you care about and say, I'm calling about this bill in your committee, even if they don't represent you. The staffer might be a jerk and ask you for your zip code, but they're not writing it down, and you can just know that. They completely understand why you're calling. But it will always be most effective to call your own legislator. So if you are, mention that you are a voter in their district. That adds extra weight to your argument. So I've also mentioned a couple times testifying. You have the ability as an Ohioan to come in and testify for and against any bill that you care about at the State House. The goal is to testify in person. It's more powerful that way because the visual of the large group in the room is very important. It's on TV, it's recorded, so there you could potentially, there's press there, so you could potentially get your story, your article, your thing in an article, and you could potentially get a back and forth with the legislator. So in person is best if you can, but we tend to make it hard. We tend to have hearings at like 10 o'clock in the morning on Wednesdays, and I can't tell you how long the hearing's going to go. I can only tell you when it starts. So you have to be able to give up a solid chunk of your day. So if you can't do that, we also have the ability to testify written only, which is still an official part of the record. The testimonies will still be available online. They'll be shareable. They will be in front of the legislators on iPads that they have in committee with them. And it's still very, very important, especially to get a large number of testimonies. Senate Bill 1, I keep bringing that up. It's last month we had an opponent hearing for that bill. We got over 1,000 opponent testimonies. and they got 14 supporters for Senate Bill 1. And there were multiple articles written about the incredible difference in how many people oppose the bill versus the small number that support it. So that number of testimonies matters. The only thing is, I can't promise you they will read the testimonies that are written. So if you can get there in person, that's the best. And it's important to note that you can only submit testimony if your bill has been scheduled for a hearing, and the type of hearing that you want to do. So if you want to oppose a bill, you have to wait until it has an opponent hearing. And that's why it's so important that you you sign up for those notice lists, so that you will get an email that it looks like this. This is what a notice is. It'll tell you which bills they're hearing, when and where they will be, and what type of testimony they're accepting. Then you can send in your testimony. The great thing, though, is that testifying is so easy that the entire process is here on this slide. So you get your notice, you write your testimony, you email your testimony. Actually, this has changed slightly. So most of this, the House and Senate, is going to still be this way, but not all of them. You email your testimony to the committee chair 24 hours before the hearing, and you email a witness slip, which is basic information about yourself, like if you're a lobbyist or not. And I will send you a blank witness slip that most committees will accept. The only change is that the Senate has actually started receiving so much testimony that they've started having people upload their testimony and witness slip to the committee website instead of emailing it. But it's still exactly the same process, where you send in, either by email or through the website, you send in your testimony and your witness slip 24 hours before the hearing, and that's the whole process. So I will send you a document on how to do that. And really, it's very, very simple, as long as we can figure out how to get you either the blank witness slip or the one that the committee is demanding. And another great thing about testimony, the shorter the better, honestly. In most situations, you don't have to feel like you're writing a term paper. It can be a few sentences if you want. A few paragraphs is perfect. So and actually, if you're testifying in person, you want it to be short so that you get everything out that you wanted to say. So you can just, it's very similar to writing a postcard, where you sit down and you write a couple paragraphs or a couple sentences of testimony and send it in, and you're officially part of the record. This is something I'll send you. This is a testimony template, just so that you can feel comfortable that your testimony is being formatted exactly the way that the professionals are doing it. So the lobbyists and you are testifying in the same format, so you can feel comfortable about that. I will send you this as a good, just a good reminder of how it should look if you want to look like the pros. Another thing that we are seeing recently is we have started seeing more and more attempts to stop us from testifying because our voices matter. So they are attempting to decrease the number of people who testify. So we have started to recommend that if that happens, people protest instead. This is a real example from a couple years ago. This bill would drastically increase the penalties for protesting at drilling and fracking sites, so like pipeline protests. And it did not end up passing this term. It passed a couple years later, though. But this bill, these folks showed up to testify against this bill in very large numbers, as you can see, and they were told that only a few of them were going to be allowed to actually testify in person. They got really mad, and instead of just silently walking away like they were hoping, the politicians were hoping, they protested. They went into the halls of the Statehouse and they chanted and they jeered and they made noise. And the press came running. And we ended up with all of these photos and interviews and articles about the bill that would not have been written if they had just let the people talk. And that is truly going forward in this new world that we live in. That is a big part of our strategy, is you want to be a problem. You want to make it clear that you are going to be more annoying, more loud, more prominent if they try to stop you from participating than if they were to just let you testify. Another option that we have for testifying or for committee participation is to watch all the House and Senate sessions and the committees online, live online. It's totally free, no subscription needed. It's ohiochannel.org, which I will send you. And the videos are archived, so you can watch them later, you can share them. I'll actually send you a document to help you if you want to download clips of yourself testifying. Those make great social media content. So a very, very helpful and free resource that we have. So all of that I just talked about was the committee process, because that's really where most of the meat happens. But once a bill passes out of committee, it still needs to get a full floor vote. So if it was in a House committee, it needs a vote from the full House. Some bills will get out of committee and then just fall into the abyss and never get through the rest of the process, and they will die at the end of 2 years. But if a bill does get out of one chamber, like the House or the Senate, it then has to go to the other chamber, do it all again. So if you came in and testified against a bill in the Senate, you could come in and testify against it in the House as well. All right, so a couple resources real quick, but I really want to get to some of the big bills that are moving. So I will send you all of these as well. This is that same website, legislature.ohio.gov. They've got a search tab that's really helpful. If you want to see what your legislators are up to, you can search by primary sponsor, which is any bill that your legislator has introduced by themselves, or co-sponsor, which is any bill that your legislator thought was important enough to put their name onto. So very, very helpful way to see what your politicians are up to and hold them accountable. And you can also search back previous years with that General Assembly tab. So great way to keep track of the politicians. But I'm going to type in a bill number so you can see what it looks like when you find a bill that interests you. So I typed in Senate Bill 198, and this page comes up. This is what the bill page looks like. It shows you a nice handy little graphic of how far along in the process the bill is. But I really want to show you the Documents tab, because there's a great resource in here, which again, I'll send you all this, but it's a great resource for if you're trying to understand a bill or help your friends understand a bill, but you don't want to force people to read the very dense text of a bill. So I'm going to click on the Documents tab here. And you can see the bill text is there, so you can read it if you want. But there's also these amazing things called an analysis, which are official nonpartisan documents written by the state, by a team of lawyers. It's called LSC, Legislative Service Commission. And they break down the bill into bullet points, just a bullet point, plain English explanation of what the bill would do if it passes. So I'm going to click on this, show you it. This is a bill analysis. They are wonderful. They are so much more digestible for just people who aren't in this field. They're so much more digestible, but they help you understand what the bill would do. And it's really a great way to spread the word about why you're so passionate about a bill or an issue without making your friends and family have to read a bill. This is another thing I'll send you. This is just a tiny, tiny sampling of the incredible advocacy organizations that we have here in Ohio. They really help you narrow down which issues you should be focusing on. So most of these groups are nonpartisan. A lot of them are issue focused. So if you're passionate about education, we've got some education groups that you can follow. They will tell you when you need to send testimony or when you need to make calls, when you need to send emails. It really helps make it feel less intimidating, less overwhelming to follow some of these groups. So this is just a small sampling. I'll send you a long list of the most active groups, and you can just pick whichever ones interest you. All right, so now we're going to talk about some of the main bills happening in Ohio right now. Let me check my time here. Yeah, okay, we're good. Very quickly, and then I'd love to take some of your questions as well. So this is our new bill tracker for this year. I added an extra 2 there, but so it's a great website. It's ohiobills.wtf. I have been updating it several times a week with new bills and calls to action. And we try to focus on bills that are most likely to be moving forward so that you are acting on bills that are most likely to pass or most likely to have a chance at passing if they're good bills. So I'm going to click on this here, show it to you. So the number one issue on a lot of people's minds right now is this bill. It's Senate Bill 1, so we call it the Higher Education Destruction Act. This bill is the one I've mentioned a few times. It would radically alter how education operates, higher ed operates in Ohio. Everything from, it would create an entire list of what they call controversial topics that would be very difficult for professors to cover in class. Everything from current events to foreign policy to climate change to abortion to marriage to immigration. The professors would have to let students reach their own conclusions about those topics. And the way we read it, it looks like professors could not actually even lower a student's grade if they wrote on a test, for example, that climate change isn't real. So really would alter how higher ed classrooms operate. It also bans everything connected to what they call DEI, so diversity and inclusion, bans scholarships and programs and groups. We're seeing a lot of complying in advance on that one. It bans academic partnerships with China, which would gut research programs across the state. It is also one of the worst attacks on workers' rights since SB 5, like 14 years ago. It would gut collective bargaining rights for all the professors, teachers' unions. It would ban full-time workers' strikes for every full-time employee at the universities. It would get rid of a lot of job security protections, and it would get rid of tenure in Ohio. So we would lose just untold numbers of professors and students and jobs to other states, which is our main argument against this bill is the economic one, is how much our universities and therefore our economy would suffer. And this bill is, we stopped it the first time around. We stopped it when it was called SB 83 last time, but it is expected to pass the legislature tomorrow. Wednesday, it is expected to pass the House. And so we are having a big, and I have a thing here. Yes. So if you are interested and able, we are having a major protest tomorrow at the Statehouse as they pass this bill, because our goal is to get Governor DeWine to veto it. So we are marching, a whole large number of students and professors are marching from Ohio State to the Statehouse tomorrow. And then a lot of other people are meeting us at the Statehouse to protest. And if you're not able to do either of those, I've got a list of actions, phone calls and things to make that I can send you all, because this one is going to be, our goal is to get Governor DeWine to veto it, which is, can't believe I'm at this point. I can't believe it's real. It's just such a bad bill. And then another big thing that's happening right now in Ohio is the budget process. And there's a ton of bills that are likely to be added to the budget that impact all of us. So pretty much anything that has any money connected to it in Ohio is budget related or can end up in the budget. And so let me walk you through a couple of the big pieces that we are fighting for and against in our budget right now in Ohio. So the big one of the big ones, Matt Huffman, we talked about him. He is saying he's not a fan of public education. He's said that for many years. He believes that we should be moving toward privatization, religious schools, that kind of thing. And he is now in a position to make that happen. So he is out here saying that spending money on schools is just unsustainable, that it can't be done anymore. And we have to counter that message by explaining that, one, we should be spending money on schools because kids should be the focus of state spending, but also that it's not just, we're not just throwing money at the problem, that there is actually a detailed, complex plan being put into place that we need them to continue implementing. So I can send you some calls to action around demanding that they put fair school funding into the budget. We can also make the argument that they are attempting to spend money on other things having to do with education rather than funding public schools that are also very expensive. So the ESA bill, this is Senate Bill 68. ESAs are, here, I've got a thing here. ESAs are essentially the next step in universal vouchers. So Ohio already has universal vouchers, but this would go even further. It would basically create a saving, like a money account, a spending account for parents, and they could use that money on anything they want as long as they could vaguely argue that it's education related. So highly unregulated, just very, very dangerous because you could spend it on whatever you want. And hopefully the kid's getting educated, but we would have very little way of making sure of that. It's not just about tuition, which is what vouchers cover. So if they're willing to spend money on this, there's money there to spend on funding our public schools, which 90% of kids use. A good bill that we're trying to get in the budget that we were hopeful about before is a bipartisan bill, so Republican and Democrats, Senate Bill 109, that would provide no-cost breakfast and lunch to students in schools across the state, every student. And we were very excited about this bill, to have a Republican on it, to have some Republican support for it. But then we started seeing things like Matt Huffman saying that it's wasteful to spend money on school meals for kids. He made a weird argument about something about green beans, like we'd have to be buying them green beans and some of the kids won't eat the green beans, therefore it's wasteful. It was quite a stretch. And then another Republican leader who runs the finance committee in the House, Brian Stewart, said that it's a problem to spend money on school meals because the richest families' children will also be getting those meals, which is quite an argument given the fact that we now have data that is coming out across Ohio that most of the money being spent on Ohio's voucher program, our universal voucher program, is being sent to rich families. In fact, 90% of the people using the vouchers in Ohio are not low-income individuals. So it is interesting that they draw the line at feeding children, but not letting the rich use vouchers for religious schools. And I can send you this as well, but there is tons of data that we can use to talk about the need for spending money on school meals that has to do with academic outcomes and academic achievement and decreasing suspension rates and all of these things that some of the legislators say they want to do. We can do a lot of that, accomplish a lot of that by actually passing this Senate Bill 109 through the budget. Another piece of the budget that I know is big up there in Cleveland, the Browns Stadium. So the Ohio politicians are attempting to spend what is $600 million on a new stadium for the Browns, and while saying that public education funding is unsustainable. Quite a contrast there. So that's one of the things we're attempting to call them out on, so that they don't end up spending that money, your tax dollars, in the budget on the Browns Stadium. Interestingly, this is one that Governor DeWine doesn't seem too interested in. So it's possible that we could get him to veto. So part of our message against this, if it does end up in the budget, might be to get Governor DeWine to line item veto it. And then another big thing, I know I want to get done here quick so I can answer some questions. There is language in the budget that could end Medicaid expansion in Ohio. So there's two different pieces in the budget. One is the Medicaid trigger language, you'll hear it called that, and then the federal mirror language as well, that would end Medicaid coverage in Ohio. So that is Medicaid expansion in Ohio. So that's 700,000 Ohioans would be impacted by that. This is a ton of language, but basically the mirror or the Medicaid trigger language would say that if the federal government reduces what it's paying for Medicaid expansion, then Ohio could just automatically end its Medicaid expansion as well. And there's a very high likelihood with the Trump administration that would happen. And then the mirror language is very similar, where it says that if the federal government guts any of its programs, Ohio could gut the same programs that we have at the state level. So that could impact way more than just Medicaid. But both of these, we are demanding their removal from the budget. And I will send you information on how to do that as well. And then the last one, there is a big fight right now because Ohioans passed issue 2 last year to legalize adult use marijuana and stop sending people to jail for using it. And the legislature is trying to mess that all up. They've got Senate Bill 56, which would recriminalize adult use marijuana in Ohio, and it would make it much harder to access. It would create like mandatory jail times. This bill is very problematic in a lot of ways. And even if you're not a marijuana person, it is important because it's disrespectful and demeaning to the voters. They've said multiple times that they don't believe that voters knew what they were talking about when they voted on this. And that is the kind of thing that we cannot stand for. So even if this isn't your issue personally, we have to fight this as an overall problem for all of us. So I'm actually going to skip through this because I want to make sure that I get enough time to talk to you all. So I'm going to send you all these afterwards. This is the how things work at the Statehouse if you're interested. And then, yes, so if you remember nothing else from today, remember how much power you have at the state level, how few people it takes to make noise at the state level, how few phone calls it takes for them to feel like you are shutting down their phone lines. You truly are just incredibly, incredibly powerful. Your voices are very loud at that level. And if you take nothing away from today other than that, I will feel successful. So I'm going to pop back in now and I will gladly answer any questions you all have. All right.
Rachel, there was one. Do you have any updates on House Bill 15 and Senate Bill 2? You may have already covered that, but I've been like doing security stuff in the background. So
No, let me pull that up on Gongware and let me check. So that's the energy bill, right?
I don't know. It's in the chat.
Yes, energy generation. So HB 15 is doing really, I actually think it might have actually passed, and it's a good bill. It's on the agenda for tomorrow, Wednesday, in the Energy Committee, and they are having supporter testimony again on that bill. So this bill would make positive change around electric company taxation and retail electric service law, and actually repeal parts of HB 6 from a few years back, one of the scandals from a few years ago. So this bill is on the agenda for tomorrow and is potentially getting some more changes to it, which indicates with this many hearings, with the fact that they're still making changes to it, that actually tells me that it might pass.
That's all the questions we have in the chat.
Rachel, I have a question.
Sure.
If there are no others. I had a conversation yesterday with my state representative, Chris Glassburn,
Mhm.
and he said that he thought they're doing the same thing they're doing in Washington, just moving things through quickly to
Yes.
get to prevent the outrage. He also said the one advantage they have is he thought they were very stupid in some of their tactics. So just comment on that if you could.
that they're moving things quickly, and that, yeah, I mean, a big part of it is that a lot of what happens at the federal level they do at the state level, and it's easier for them at the state level because there's very few people paying attention, so they get less pushback. So all of the attacks on DEI, diversity, and inclusion, those are happening here too, but there's fewer people paying attention, so it's easier to do than what's happening with Trump. It's also, I will tell you that a lot of people worry about running for office because they worry they're not qualified. But if you pay attention to the state house committees, you will know that you are qualified to run for office. That's all I'll say on that topic. Yes, Randy.
Randy, you have to unmute.
Okay. I've been involved with some of the people that were dealing with 15 and SB2 and all. And the main things that we talked to Kent Smith about it. And the bottom line for him is that it's going to get rid of the final bit of legacy of HB6.
Yes.
Now, the other thing is that there's interest in general by saying that the bills should be a lot more friendly towards renewable energy.
Yes.
And my question is, it's going to be voted on, you say tomorrow?
It does not appear to have a vote tomorrow. They're adding a sub bill tomorrow. So they're making changes to it in committee tomorrow.
So you can still go and call people up and
Yes,
it matter.
absolutely. Yeah. Interestingly, it's also moving in the Senate at the same time. So Senate Bill 2, I don't know if those are identical bills, but I have seen them mentioned together. So I'm going to put both
Yeah,
of
they're
these.
kind of twin bills.
They're twin bills. Yeah.
I know, some of us talked to Tristan a
Yes.
week or so ago, and he was saying that the HB 15 was the bill that had the most in it.
Positive things.
Worth,
I think I've heard
yeah,
that too. Yeah.
that was worth, HB's, I mean, Senate Bill 2 really didn't have a firm identity at that time that
Okay.
we talked, because we went down there for the Bryan protest
Hmm.
on last Wednesday before last. So,
It does appear. So both of these are moving. They're both still receiving amendments and they both had a lot of hearings. It's interesting that they're not the same bill. It's almost like the House and Senate are debating over which of them they actually want to pass.
what's really interesting is that the big utilities are fighting them tooth and nail.
Yep.
This is one thing where, you usually get used to energy bills being rubber stamps for the coal and oil boys, but this ain't necessarily so on this one.
Right.
That's what kind of makes an interesting bill. Okay, well
I'm not
that
seeing a vote for it tomorrow. So yes, keep calling the House Energy Committee on HB 15. That is where it is still going to be, at least for this week.
oh, okay, because a message that I got, they almost expected it to be passed this week.
Okay, let me check. I'm not seeing a. I'll check. I'll check while we're talking here.
Okay, but that's my 2 bits. I was just wanting to make sure that I'm usually really remiss on calling. So your presentation has caused me to repent and,
I'm honored.
and consider my errors.
Ooh,
Okay.
interesting. They just they revised the notice. It was going to have a vote in committee and it is not scheduled for a vote anymore. So they must be still debating.
Uh-huh. Oh, okay. Okay, because usually I like to go and give written testimony because some people think that I'm a better writer than a talker, such as Steve. So so I always believe in putting my best foot forward on this.
There you
But I'll
go.
start talking.
Randy, I never said you weren't a good speaker, but you are a great writer. And for those of you who might be new to the Progressive Caucus, every Tuesday when we send out CCPC recommended, Randy has a little column in there called Randy's Rants, which is excellent. Any other questions for Rachel? I think Marianne Meeker.
She's doing a thumbs up.
Oh, thumbs up. I'm so sorry.
I think we're done. I don't see any other questions.
Well, thank you, folks. Let's give Rachel a big round of applause.
Thanks for
And
having me.
we will see you all April 23rd, or maybe sooner at a Trump resistance protest, or maybe down in Columbus. Who knows? Take care. Good night.